Communications Officer Rindal stared at her sensor readings in complete shock. The numbers had to be wrong. They just had to be. She ran the scan 3 more times, but the results stayed the same. By the ancients, she screamed, her voice echoing through the bridge. Captain, you need to see this right now. Captain Thelvas rushed to her station, his 4 hearts pounding with dread. What is it? Are the humans close? Sir, these aren't medical ships, Rindal whispered, her silver skin turning pale with fear. These are warships. 12 massive battleships heading straight for us. The main screen lit up with the tactical display. Thelvas felt his blood freeze as he saw what was coming toward them. Each human vessel was over a kilometer long, covered in weapon systems that could destroy entire moons. These weren't the small, peaceful rescue ships he had expected. These were instruments of war. Dear spirits, he breathed. What have I done? The lead ship alone carried enough firepower to turn his colony vessel into space dust in seconds. Behind it came 11 more identical monsters, their dark hulls bristling with missile launchers, energy cannons, and weapons he couldn't even identify. Sir, they're not slowing down, reported his navigation officer. They'll reach us in 6 hours at their current speed. Thelvas realized his terrible mistake. He had invited the most dangerous predators in the galaxy to come find his helpless people. The humans hadn't sent doctors and nurses. They had sent an invasion fleet. Open a channel immediately, he ordered, his voice shaking. Emergency priority. Tell them we withdraw our request for help. Tell them to turn around and go home. Rindal worked frantically at her controls. Broadcasting now, sir. Maximum power on all frequencies. They waited. The seconds felt like hours. Finally, Rindal looked up with despair in her eyes. No response, Captain. They're not even slowing down. They're maintaining course and speed directly toward us. On the other side of space, Admiral Jake Miller stood on the bridge of his flagship Mercy and listened to the alien message with confusion. His translation computer was working overtime to make sense of their panicked words. They want us to turn around, he asked Commander Lisa Hayes. They're trying to call off the rescue. Lisa checked her own readings. Looks that way, sir. They seem pretty desperate about it too. Maybe they changed their minds about accepting help from us. That doesn't make sense, Jake said, rubbing his chin. Their ship is still dying. Their people are still running out of air. Why would they suddenly not want our help? First contact protocols say we should respect their wishes, Lisa suggested carefully. If they don't want us there, maybe we should consider turning back. Jake's face hardened with determination. Forget the protocols, Lisa. There are 50,000 innocent people on that ship who are going to die if we don't help them. I don't care if their captain got cold feet. We're not abandoning them. He turned to address his crew. All ships, maintain course and speed. Dr. Bradley, how are your medical teams coming along? Down in the medical bay, Dr. Tom Bradley looked up from his preparations. His team had been working non-stop to get ready for the most challenging medical operation in human history. As ready as we can be, Admiral, Tom replied over the comm system. But I have to be honest with you. We have no idea if our techniques will even work on their biology. We might end up doing more harm than good. Then we'll learn fast, Jake said firmly. Figure it out as you go. That's what humans do best. He switched to the military channel. Colonel Peterson, get your Marines ready for emergency boarding procedures. We're going to have to get onto that ship fast. Yes sir, came the gruff reply. Boarding teams are already suiting up. We'll be ready to breach their hull in 4 hours. Back on the Zephyrian ship, Captain Thelvas listened in growing horror as his communications team managed to intercept and partially decode the human radio chatter. The translator was primitive, but it caught enough words to paint a terrifying picture. Boarding teams ready for deployment, came one transmission. Acceptable casualty rates calculated and approved, came another. All weapons systems armed and ready. Weapons free if necessary. Hull breach equipment loaded and tested. Thelvas sank into his command chair as the awful truth hit him. These humans hadn't come to rescue anyone. They were talking like soldiers preparing for an invasion. Boarding teams. Casualty rates. Weapons free. These were the words of conquerors, not healers. Sir, Rindal said quietly, what do we do? Our weapons are completely useless against ships that size. Our shields won't even slow them down. Thelvas looked around at his bridge crew. These were good people. Scientists, engineers, navigators. They had never hurt anyone in their lives. Now they were all going to die because of his decision to trust the Deathworlders. There's nothing we can do, he whispered. We called for help, and instead we invited our own destruction. Send a message to all sections of the ship. Tell the people to prepare for the worst. As the human war fleet drew closer, 50,000 Zephyrian civilians huddled in their quarters, waiting for their fate. They had escaped the slow death of system failure, only to face something potentially much worse. The Deathworlders were coming, and everyone in the galaxy knew what happened when humans wanted something badly enough. They took it, no matter who stood in their way. In just a few hours, they would find out what humans really wanted with their helpless colony ship. The massive colony ship Peaceful Dawn floated dead in space like a giant metal tomb. Inside, Captain Thelvas stared at the glowing red warning lights that covered every screen on his bridge. The numbers didn't lie. His engines were completely destroyed. The life support systems were breaking down fast. 50,000 innocent families were going to die in just 2 days. Thelvas ran his four-fingered hand through his silver hair. These weren't soldiers or explorers. These were teachers, children, farmers, and grandparents. They had sold everything they owned to buy passage to their new home world. Now they would never see it. Captain, we're getting answers to our emergency call, said Communications Officer Rindal. Her usual calm voice shook with fear. The closest Galactic Council rescue ships are 12 days away. 12 days. They had 2 days to live, maybe less. Thelvas felt his heart sink. The Galactic Council ships were too far away. By the time help arrived, they would find nothing but a ship full of frozen bodies. Wait, sir, Rindal said, checking her equipment again. There's another response. Much closer. Who? Thelvas asked, though he already suspected the terrible answer. It's coming from the quarantine zone. The Sol system. Sol 3 specifically. They say help is on the way immediately. Every alien in the galaxy knew about Sol 3. It was the home of the humans, the most dangerous species ever discovered. These creatures came from a death world so violent that most life forms couldn't even survive on its surface. The Galactic Council had declared their entire solar system off-limits after first contact went horribly wrong 50 years ago. Humans were known for 2 things. First, they never backed down from a fight. Second, they solved every problem with overwhelming force. When other species had disagreements, they talked and made treaties. When humans had disagreements, entire planets burned. But his people were dying. What choice did he have? Meanwhile, 18 light-years away on Earth, Admiral Jake Miller stood in the command center of the massive hospital ship Mercy. The alien distress signal played on repeat through the speakers. Even through the translation software, he could hear the desperation in their voices. How long to reach them, Lisa? He asked his second-in-command. Commander Lisa Hayes checked the navigation computers. 18 hours if we push the engines to maximum. But sir, this is first contact with a new species. Shouldn't we wait for orders from Earth Command? People are dying out there, Jake said firmly. We don't wait for paperwork when lives are at stake. He turned to address the entire bridge crew. Send word to the Third Fleet. Every ship we have. Medical vessels, supply ships, escort carriers, the works. If we're going to meet aliens for the first time, we're going to do it properly. The entire Third Fleet, sir? Lisa asked with surprise. That's 12 ships. Isn't that a bit much for a rescue mission? Jake shook his head. These aliens don't know us. They're probably scared. When they see us coming, they need to know we mean business. We're not sending a few medics in a shuttle. We're sending everything we have. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Tom Bradley gathered his team of doctors and nurses. They had trained for this day their entire careers, but nobody really believed it would happen. First contact with alien life. Listen up, people, Tom said to the crowd of medical staff. We have no idea what these beings look like. We don't know their biology, their chemistry, or even if our medicines will work on them. But 50,000 of them are going to die if we don't try. He pulled up the few images they had received from the alien ship. Strange, tall creatures with silver skin and 4 arms. Their internal organs were completely different from humans. We're going to have to figure this out as we go, Tom continued. Use your training, use your instincts, and remember why we became doctors. To save lives. It doesn't matter if those lives are human or not. The medical teams rushed to prepare. They loaded every type of medicine, every piece of equipment, every tool they might need. If they couldn't save these aliens with what they brought, then nobody could save them. Back on the Zephyrian ship, Captain Thelvas made the hardest decision of his life. Send a reply to the humans, he ordered. Tell them we accept their help. As soon as he said the words, he wondered if he had just doomed his people to something worse than death. But what choice did he have? Let them die slowly from system failure, or risk whatever the Deathworlders might do to them? The message went out across space. Help was coming from the most feared species in the galaxy. The impact shook the entire ship like an earthquake. Captain Thelvas gripped his command chair as the lights flickered and emergency alarms screamed throughout peaceful dawn. The human boarding pods had struck their hull with the force of falling meteors, punching through the outer armor like it was made of paper. Hull breaches on Deck 7, 12, and 15, his damage control officer reported with panic in his voice. They're coming through fast. Thelvas watched his security monitors in terror as the first human soldiers emerged from the smoking holes in his ship. These weren't the small, fragile beings he had imagined. They were giants encased in black armor that made them look like walking machines of death. Each suit was nearly 3 meters tall and covered in weapon systems that could level buildings. The lead figure moved with mechanical precision, scanning the corridor with glowing red sensors. Behind him came a dozen more identical nightmares, their heavy boots shaking the deck plates with each step. They moved like a pack of predators hunting wounded prey. This is it, Thelvas whispered to his crew. They've come to finish us off. But then something impossible happened. The lead human reached into a compartment on his back and pulled out what looked like a medical scanner, not a weapon. Clear this section immediately, the human's voice boomed through his suit speakers. We need to get these civilians to safety right now. Sergeant Mike Davis had led boarding operations before, but never like this. Usually, he was fighting enemy soldiers trying to kill him. Today, he was racing against time to save lives. The corridor was filled with injured Zephyrian families who couldn't move on their own. Johnson, grab that wounded kid over there, he ordered one of his Marines. Peterson, help that elderly couple. Move it, people. We don't have all day. His team lifted the injured aliens with surprising care, despite their intimidating appearance. These massive armored suits were designed for war, but today they were being used as mobile hospitals. Each Marine carried medical supplies instead of ammunition, emergency oxygen instead of grenades. Down the hall, Dr. Tom Bradley worked frantically over a small Zephyrian child who was barely breathing. The kid couldn't have been more than 6 years old in human terms, with silver skin and 4 tiny arms that hung limply at his sides. Their lungs work completely different from ours, Tom muttered as he studied his medical scanner. But the basic idea is the same. Get oxygen to the blood, keep the heart pumping. He pulled out a human respirator and quickly modified it to fit over the child's strange nose structure. The little alien's eyes fluttered open for a moment, looked at the terrifying human face above him, then closed again peacefully. Somehow, the child wasn't afraid. Got you, buddy, Tom whispered. You're going to be okay. All throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Human Marines in full battle armor crawling through collapsed sections to reach trapped civilians. Doctors performing emergency surgery in zero gravity while wearing protective suits. Engineers literally tearing apart walls to install temporary life support systems. When Section C became too dangerous for the Zephyrian rescue teams to enter, the humans didn't hesitate for a second. The radiation levels would kill most species within minutes, but the Marines charged in anyway. Sir, that area is a death trap, one of Thelvas's officers warned. The reactor leak will cook anyone who goes in there. Tell the humans, Thelvas replied. Warn them not to enter. But it was too late. A squad of human Marines was already inside, their armor's radiation shielding barely protecting them as they carried out unconscious Zephyrian workers one by one. 2 of the humans collapsed from radiation poisoning, but they kept going until every alien was safe. Captain Thelvas found Admiral Miller in what used to be the ship's dining hall, now converted into a massive command center. The human was coordinating the entire rescue operation like a military general planning a battle. Dozens of screens showed every section of the ship, every rescue team, every medical station. I don't understand, Thelvas said, his voice filled with confusion. Why are you doing this? Why risk your lives for complete strangers? Miller didn't look up from his displays, where he was directing rescue teams to the most critical areas. Because that's what you do when someone calls for help. You answer the call. But your people are getting hurt, Thelvas protested. I've seen 3 of your soldiers collapse from radiation. One of your doctors has been working for 18 hours straight without a break. This isn't just helping. This is war, Miller finished for him. We're fighting a war against death itself. And in war, you don't hold anything back. That's when Thelvas finally understood what he was seeing. Humans didn't know how to do anything halfway. When they fought enemies, they used overwhelming force until nothing was left standing. When they saved lives, they used that same overwhelming force until every possible life was preserved. These weren't just doctors and soldiers doing their jobs. These were warriors who had declared war on death and suffering, and they would accept no casualties on their watch. The human approach was brutal in its efficiency. They treated every injured alien like a fallen comrade who had to be saved at any cost. They moved through the dying ship like an army conquering territory, except the territory they were conquering was death itself. For the first time since this nightmare began, Captain Thelvas allowed himself to hope. If anyone could save his people from certain doom, it would be these terrifying, wonderful creatures who fought just as hard to preserve life as they did to destroy their enemies. The Deathworlders had come not as conquerors, but as armored angels. The dying ship was falling apart around them. Metal beams crashed down from the ceiling as the peaceful dawn shook violently. Emergency lights flickered red, casting horrible shadows on the walls. The structural damage was getting worse by the minute, and some sections of the ship were becoming completely impossible to survive in. Marine Corporal Amy Johnson stared at the readings on her helmet display and felt her stomach drop. Section D-7 was showing temperatures that would melt most metals. The main reactor was leaking superheated plasma into the corridors, turning them into blazing furnaces that glowed white-hot. Ma'am, we've got 43 Zephyrian civilians trapped in D-7, reported her squad leader over the radio. But the temperature readings are insane. It's like walking into the surface of the sun. Amy looked at the thermal imaging on her screen. The corridor ahead of her was glowing so bright it hurt to look at, even through her armor's protection. Her suit's computer was flashing urgent warnings in red letters. Temperature exceeds maximum safety limits, the mechanical voice announced. Entry not recommended. Survival time estimated at 4 minutes maximum. Override all safety protocols, Amy commanded without hesitation. We're going in. Ma'am, this is suicide, one of her Marines protested. Our armor wasn't designed for this kind of heat. Those people didn't choose to be trapped in there, Amy replied, checking her rifle and medical supplies one last time. But we can choose to get them out. Follow me. She stepped into the superheated corridor, and immediately her armor's cooling system started screaming alarms. The temperature was so high that the metal walls around her were actually glowing like burning coals. Her boots left smoking footprints on the deck plates. 20 meters in, she found the first group of trapped aliens. They were huddled together behind an overturned table, their silver skin turning blue from heat exhaustion. One of them, a young mother holding her baby, looked up at Amy with desperate eyes. I've got you, Amy said, though she knew the alien couldn't understand her words. She lifted the mother and child in her arms, feeling her suit's cooling system fail completely. Inside her helmet, the temperature started climbing dangerously high. Her vision blurred from the heat, but she kept moving. One step at a time, carrying the aliens back toward safety. Behind her, her squad was doing the same thing, each Marine carrying as many civilians as they could manage. By the time they reached the safe zone, Amy's armor was so hot it was smoking. She collapsed to her knees as medical technicians rushed to help the rescued aliens. Her suit's computer was flashing critical warnings about heat damage to internal systems. Johnson, you okay? Asked her squad leader. I'll live, Amy gasped, pulling off her helmet to breathe cooler air. How many did we get out? All of them. 43 civilians, safe and sound. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, Dr. Tom Bradley was performing what might have been the most difficult surgery in human history. The Zephyrian patient had internal injuries that were bleeding badly, but they were floating in zero gravity because this section had lost artificial gravity when the hull was breached. All around them, atmosphere was venting out through cracks in the walls, creating a hurricane of wind that threatened to blow away his surgical instruments. Pieces of debris floated past his head as he worked with steady hands to save the alien's life. Doctor, we need to move, shouted one of his nurses. This section is going to decompress completely in 5 minutes. I need more time. Tom replied, not taking his eyes off his patient. This artery is completely severed. If I don't fix it now, he'll die. That's when Lieutenant Mark Wilson made a decision that would define him for the rest of his life. The young officer positioned himself between the surgery and the worst of the debris field, using his own armored body as a human shield. Chunks of metal and plastic bounced off his back as he spread his arms wide, protecting the delicate operation. When a piece of sharp debris headed straight for Dr. Bradley's head, Mark caught it with his bare hand, cutting himself badly in the process. You've got all the time you need, Doc, Mark said through gritted teeth. I'm not moving until you're done. Up on the bridge, Captain Thelvas watched all of this happening through his security monitors. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. These humans were risking everything, sacrificing everything, for people they had never met before today. Sir, Communications Officer Rindal said quietly, her voice full of sadness. I've been monitoring the human casualty reports. They've lost 17 people so far. 17. Thelvas whispered. 17 humans have died saving my people. Yes, sir. And they're not slowing down. They're still going into the most dangerous sections, still pulling out our civilians. Thelvas watched his screens as a human medic named Rebecca tried to save a Zephyrian child in a collapsed section. A support beam fell, crushing the human woman instantly, but she had thrown herself over the alien child just before impact. The child lived because Rebecca died protecting her. That's when everything became clear to Captain Thelvas. The Galactic Council had been wrong about humans. They weren't dangerous because they were evil. They were dangerous because they were absolute. When humans decided to do something, they did it with every fiber of their being. When they waged war, they were terrifyingly efficient because they held nothing back. When they showed mercy, they applied that same ruthless determination to saving lives. They didn't know how to do anything halfway. They couldn't do anything halfway. It was all or nothing, always. The galaxy quarantined the wrong species, Thelvas said softly. We locked them away because we were afraid of their intensity. But that intensity isn't evil. It's just, absolute. Rindal looked up at him with confusion. Sir. They're not monsters, Thelvas explained. They're mirrors. They reflect back exactly what you give them. Give them friendship, and they'll die for you. Give them hatred, and they'll destroy you completely. There's no middle ground with humans. As he watched more human rescuers risk everything to save his people, Captain Thelvas realized that the galaxy needed to learn a new truth about the species they had feared for so long. Humans weren't the problem. They were the solution, when the problem was big enough to require someone willing to pay any price to make things right. It was over. After 36 hours of non-stop rescue operations, the last Zephyrian civilian had been safely transferred to the human medical ships. The peaceful Dawn was now just an empty metal shell, slowly breaking apart as it drifted through space. But its people were alive. 49,000 Zephyrians were now scattered across 12 human vessels, receiving medical care from the same soldiers who had risked everything to save them. The humans had turned their warships into floating hospitals, with every corridor and cargo bay converted into emergency treatment centers. Captain Thelvas stood on the observation deck of the human flagship Mercy, looking out through the massive windows at the other ships in the fleet. Each one was filled with his people, being cared for by aliens who had never met them before yesterday. What struck him most was what he could see happening on the decks below. In one section, human crew members were holding a memorial service for their fallen comrades, their heads bowed in silent respect for the 17 people who had died during the rescue. But just a few meters away, other humans were celebrating with Zephyrian families, sharing food and trying to communicate despite the language barriers. They were mourning their dead and celebrating life at the exact same time, with the same intensity they brought to everything else. I still can't believe it, Thelvas said to Admiral Jake Miller, who was standing beside him. 17 of your people died for us. Complete strangers they had never met before in their lives. Miller nodded slowly, his face showing the weight of command. Every death under his watch was personal to him, Thelvas realized. This human leader felt responsible for every single person who served under him. That's the price sometimes, Miller said quietly. But look at what we accomplished. Look at what we saved. He gestured toward the nearest medical bay, where human doctors were working alongside Zephyrian medics to treat the remaining injured. Children who would have died were now laughing and playing. Elderly aliens who were barely breathing yesterday were now sitting up and eating their first real meals in weeks. Your Galactic Council fears us, Thelvas said, voicing the thought that had been troubling him. They say humans are too dangerous to be allowed into civilized galactic society. Maybe they're right, came an unexpected voice. Dr. Tom Bradley walked up to join them, looking exhausted after performing surgery for 36 hours straight without a break. His hands were still stained with alien blood from his latest operation. We do everything at maximum intensity, Tom continued, leaning against the window for support. Love, hate, war, peace, helping, hurting. We don't know how to do anything halfway. When we care about something, we care with everything we have. When we're angry about something, we stay angry until it's completely destroyed. Commander Lisa Hayes approached the group, carrying a data pad with casualty reports. She had been coordinating the rescue efforts from the beginning, and her voice carried the strain of the last day and a half. But sometimes, Lisa said quietly, the galaxy needs someone willing to pay any price to do what's right. Sometimes you need people who don't know when to quit, who don't know when to stop caring. Thelvas thought about that as he watched a human marine teaching a group of Zephyrian children how to play a simple card game. The same hands that could operate weapons of mass destruction were now gently helping alien kids understand the rules of a game. I have to write a report to the Galactic Council about this, Thelvas said. About what happened here. About what your people did for mine. What will you tell them? Miller asked. Thelvas was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. The truth. That we were wrong about why you were quarantined. We thought it was because you were evil, because you were monsters who couldn't be trusted around civilized species. He paused, watching as human medical staff worked tirelessly to help aliens they couldn't even properly communicate with. But that's not why you were locked away, is it? You were contained because your absolute commitment to whatever you believe in terrifies other species. When humans decide to do something, you do it with every fiber of your being. There's no middle ground, no compromise, no half measures. Tom nodded tiredly. When we care about something, we'll die for it. When we hate something, we'll destroy it utterly. There's no in-between with us. And that scares people, Lisa added. Other species are more moderate. They make careful decisions, they weigh costs and benefits, they find compromise solutions that make everyone sort of happy. But sometimes, Thelvas said, understanding dawning in his voice, compromise isn't enough. Sometimes you need someone who won't stop, won't quit, won't give up until the job is completely done. He looked around at the rescued Zephyrians filling every available space on the human ships. Families that had given up hope were now reunited. People who were preparing to die were now making plans for their new lives. I'm going to recommend to the council that your quarantine be lifted, Thelvas announced. Not because you're safe, you're not. You're probably the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But you're dangerous to the right things. Miller raised an eyebrow. The right things? Death. Suffering. Injustice. Evil. Thelvas counted on his 4 fingers. When those things threaten innocent people, the galaxy needs someone willing to fight them with absolute commitment. Someone who won't stop until every life that can be saved is saved. He looked out at the stars, thinking about all the other species in the galaxy who had learned to fear the name human. Maybe it's time they learned that such intensity, when it's directed at the right targets, isn't something to be afraid of. Maybe it's something to be grateful for. As the human fleet prepared to escort the Zephyrian refugees to their new home, Captain Thelvas began writing his report. It would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the species from the death world called Earth. Sometimes the most dangerous people in the universe are exactly the ones you want on your side.